Tonight is December 31st of 2019. It's the end of this garbage decade and we're going into a new decade, which I'm very excited for and hoping things will get better.
Boy, you were wrong, Brick. You haven't seen anything yet. 2020 will be way worse than you could ever imagine. And it's going to be just as bad as the 2010. And that's where we're going to start this retrospective.
Now, 2020 did not start with the pandemic or anything else, at least in most countries. 2020 mainly started off like a normal year, but there was still a lot of controversy, and that's where we start. In Australia, there was the Australian bushfires, which continued all the way through January. This affected more than 500 animals, and the Royal Navy and the Australian Air Force came in to direct mass evacuation efforts, just like most wildfires. The wildfires still continued to spread up until February. The Australian wildfires were record-breaking, as well as historic, because the wildfires spread from west to east, on the north side up to the east and west, and around the sides on the south. Those wildfires were bigger than any California wildfires combined. A U.S. drone strike has struck a vehicle containing 2 people in Iraq. Iranian general and military leader Qasem Soleimani and Iraqi parliamentary leader al-Mohandes. After this happened, President Donald Trump had tweeted out the American flag, and he even stated in his speech, along with other things, military command did not do this to start a war. He wanted to end a war from starting. Because in their perspective, Soleimani did a lot of bad things, such as trying to start war with America and accessing nuclear weapons.
As long as I'm President of the United States, Iran will never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon.
Because of the airstrike, Iran warned that there would have been a war, and this was left with countless memes and people saying that World War III is going to come, or that the United States triggered World War III to happen. But so far, no World War III has mainly occurred throughout 2020. Mostly we got a pandemic. The impeachment trial of President Donald Trump started in the Senate on January 16th. This was just nearly a month after December of 2019, where Trump got impeached by the U.S. House of Representatives. This was the third impeachment trial to happen to a president, after Andrew Johnson in 1868 and Bill Clinton in 1998. The Republican majority voted on January 21st to reject 11 amendments proposed by the Democrats, which introduced subpoena authority to introduce testimony from White House officials. Democrats were only given at least 2 days to introduce their testimonies, among a window of more than 48 hours or so for 1 day each. 1 day each would be to have 24 hours each for their testimonies. This would go on throughout the rest of January, and they would decide a decision in early February. By the end of January, there would be a devastating helicopter crash in Calabasas, California. Out of all the people that were on there, the most devastating was the death of former Los Angeles Lakers basketball player Kobe Bryant and his daughter, 13-year-old Gianna Bryant. Weather conditions were like cloudy and such. But during the helicopter flight, the pilot tried to call a nearby control center, but they were flying too low. And then they ended up crashing right before they get to their destination. And this caused blunt force trauma for everybody on board. This was the most devastating, as many people in the basketball community and out of the community paid tributes to Kobe Bryant, including basketball player Michael Jordan, former U.S. presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, and President Donald Trump. But because of the loss of the former NBA player and Los Angeles Lakers player Kobe Bryant, the NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has said in a statement, "The NBA family is devastated by the tragic passing of Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna. For 20 seasons, Kobe showed us what is possible when remarkable talent blends with an absolute devotion to winning. He was one of the most extraordinary players in the history of the game, with accomplishments that are legendary. But he will be remembered the most for inspiring people around the world to pick up a basketball and compete to the very best of their ability. He was generous with the wisdom he required and saw it as his mission to share it with future generations of players, taking special delight in passing down his love of the game to John." Originally during that, they were planning on going to a game, and Kobe Bryant was going to coach Gianna's team. But that never happened since they crashed before they got to their destination. So all I can say to that is just it was very tragic. But I hope his legacy does live on. After more than 2 weeks of debate, President Trump was acquitted by the U.S. Senate on February 5th. This was on both of the impeachment articles, as neither article had more than a 2/3 majority of all senators. Over 52 Republican senators voted against the charge of abuse of power against President Trump, and all 53 voted against the charge of obstruction from Congress. And Mitt Romney became the first senator in U.S. history, or Republican senator in U.S. history, to vote the incumbent president, who is of their party, from office. So by the end, Trump was acquitted and he still was able to keep his job as president, as he was acquitted of everything he was accused for. The World Health Organization officially sets a nickname for the disease, which would be known as COVID-19. This was after late January, where the World Health Organization marks the outbreak of the disease as a public health emergency of international concern, which is about the 6th time this measure has been invoked since the year 2009. This is as cases have been spreading in a lot of Asian countries outside of China, and no one would know when it would come to U.S. or other countries.
All right, good afternoon. I think you will all have seen that the World Health Organization has declared the novel coronavirus outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. It is also important to note that this designation did not include any travel or trade restriction based on the current information available.
By late February, we would have a stock market crash. This would mean the Dow would plunge by over 1,195 points, at least 4.4%, as several stocks would go down. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ was down more than 10% from recent high. This took the Dow at least 10 sessions up into a correction. In fact, the Dow and S&P 500 were on track for the worst weekly performance since 2008's Great Recession. This would also follow several days of large falls, which would make it just as bad as the Great Depression, if not worse, for the stock market. Not only several days, but it would also take several months on most stocks. By middle of March, the World Health Organization confirmed that the COVID-19 epidemic would be considered a pandemic. However, in most other countries, this was considered a pandemic before, but it wasn't confirmed to be a pandemic until COVID-19 expanded throughout the United States. In my opinion, some governors took it a little bit too seriously, because some states canned schools in all counties before some counties had COVID-19 cases. And I don't think states should have done that as a precaution. They should have had other counties cancel school when the counties would have cases themselves. And the cases from those that belong to those counties happened way out of state. Just because some part of the state has had cases doesn't mean the whole state should cancel schools. That should be the district's responsibility, in my opinion. And if you don't know what a pandemic is a disease that's spreading in more than multiple countries around the world at the same time.
Tonight, I want to speak with you about our nation's unprecedented response to the coronavirus outbreak that started in China and is now spreading throughout the world. Today, the World Health Organization officially announced that this is a global pandemic.
U.S. President Donald Trump had announced that they would be suspending funding to the World Health Organization on its investigation of how they handle the COVID-19 pandemic and its relationship with China. This was one of the reasons as to why the special that aired on NBC, ABC, and CBS, One World Together at Home, premiered less than a week later. And that special was mainly to encourage people to support the World Health Organization after Donald Trump suspended funding against them, just to investigate their handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Black Lives Matter protests would carry out by the end of May until June. This happened because of related police brutality stuff over the killing of George Floyd, which happened over a day before most of these protests on the 25th.
I can breathe.
Although some people say that George Floyd just had some few problems because he had COVID and other things, because he was originally diagnosed with COVID and many other lung-related problems, but that still doesn't excuse the fact that one of the cops have contributed to his death, maybe more. But it's because of that that many people did protests against the killings of George Floyd and other related people such as Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery.
No justice, no peace! No justice, no peace!
Protests would come through the end of May and would even last till the beginning of June. And it happened everywhere around the world, mostly in places in the United States and in countries such as the United Kingdom and Australia, to name a few. Black Lives Matter protests were still ongoing throughout most of the summer, and they called for justice for George Floyd and other people that got killed or were part of police brutality. This would be done as the officers were convicted to charges of manslaughter, as well as other charges. And a new phase of a rare solar eclipse occurred on June 21st, 2020, which was mainly at nighttime, but was only seen in one part of the world. And that one part of the world was parts of Africa and Asia, where it was visible. Include the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, southern Pakistan, northern India, and China. As long as the weather was clear, people saw that ring of fire solar eclipse. The regions in the eclipse at least saw a partial eclipse include Southeast Europe, much of Africa, the Indian Ocean, and the Pacific Ocean. To promote a Bitcoin scam, celebrities, CEOs, and even political figures had their Twitter accounts hacked. This included Kim Kardashian, Kanye West, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, U.S. presidential candidate Joe Biden, and former President Barack Obama, along with many other celebrities, including YouTubers. During the time this happened, Twitter chief executive Jack Dorsey tweeted out, "Tough day for us at Twitter. We all feel terrible this happened. We're diagnosing it. We'll share everything we can when we have more complete understanding of exactly what happened. Love to our teammates working hard to make this right." And by 8:30 Eastern time, users with a verified account were able to send tweets again, but Twitter said it was still working on fit. Now, this didn't make much sense as not all verified accounts were hacked or affected with the Bitcoin scam.
8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Engine ignition. 2, 1, 0. Right, and liftoff. As the countdown to Mars continues, the perseverance of humanity launching the next generation of robotic explorers to the Red Planet.
At the end of July, NASA successfully launched its 2020 rover mission for signs of ancient life on Mars and collect samples for return to Earth. The mission includes technology demonstrations to prepare for future human missions on Mars. The rover launched with the Ingenuity Mars helicopter at 7:50 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket from Space Launch Complex 41 at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida. The ULA Elias V Center upper stage initially placed the Mars 2020 spacecraft into a parking orbit around Earth. The engine fired for a second time. The spacecraft separated from the center as expected. Navigation data indicate that the spacecraft was perfectly on course to Mars. In the final of the 2019 to 2020 UEFA Champions League, Bayern Munich had beat Paris Saint-Germain 1-0 in a tightly contested Champions League final in Lisbon to claim the crown for the 6th time. After the game, a night of joy happened for Bayern coach Hansi Flick, who added the Champions League to the Bundesliga after initially taking over as a tournament coach from Sat Niko Kovac in November of 2019. In contrast, it was a night of bitter disappointment for Paris Saint-Germain's two attacking superstars, Neymar and Kylian Mbappé, who failed to produce their best and found themselves frustrated by Bayern's keeper and man of the match Manuel Neuer when they had the best of the first half chances. Hurricane Laura would make landfall in Louisiana when it was downgraded to a tropical storm after making landfall near the Texas border in Louisiana overnight as a Category 4 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. This made Hurricane Laura the most intense hurricane to make landfall in Louisiana in 164 years, since what was called the Last Island Storm in 1856. It is also tied for the strongest hurricane on record to ever hit the state. The storm surged top 10 feet in parts of western Louisiana, far less than the maximum prediction of 15 to 20 feet. The highest water levels were seen to the right of the storm center over a wildlife refuge area sparing the more densely populated areas in the region. By mid of September, Microsoft had planned and acquired to buy ZeniMax Media Inc., which was the owner of the video game publisher Bethesda Softworks, for $7.5 billion in cash, marking the biggest video game purchase ever by Microsoft. Bethesda is publisher of games such as Doom and Fallout, and also has 2 titles slated for a debut in 2021. ZeniMax, based in Rockville, Maryland, owns several other studios across the globe, giving Microsoft's Xbox business a much-needed infusion of titles and game developers. One of the biggest privately held game companies is Bethesda, with 2,300 employees worldwide, Microsoft said. The latest in the Elder Scrolls series has sold more than 20 million copies, making them one of the top-selling games of all time. This has been left with a lot of mostly backlash and not that many positive things from fans about it. Mostly fans of Fallout and other games that Bethesda produced were not that happy with the deal. NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft, which stands for Origins, Spectral Interpretation, Resource Identification, Security, Regolith Explorer. The spacecraft unfurled its robotic arm and, in a first for the agency, briefly touched an asteroid to collect dust and pebbles from the surface for delivery to Earth in 2023, which is less than 3 years from now. The well-preserved ancient asteroid known as Bennu is currently more than 200 million miles from Earth. Bennu offers scientists a window into the early solar system as it was first taking shape billions of years ago, and flanking ingredients that could have helped seed life on Earth. If the sample collection event, known as Touch as Go, provides enough of a sample, mission teams will command the spacecraft to begin stowing the precious primordial cargo to begin its journey back to Earth in March of 2021. Otherwise, they will prepare for another attempt in January. This was the first time NASA ever got a spacecraft to grab stuff from an asteroid, which is really hard to get as asteroids are floating in space, in which dust and pebbles from an asteroid are really rare. Just a few days later, NASA's Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, or SOFIA, confirmed for the first time water on the sunlit surface of the moon. This discovery indicates that water may be distributed across the lunar surface and not limited to cold, shadowed places. Like this flying observatory had detected water molecules in the Clavius crater, which was one of the largest craters visible from Earth. Located in the moon's southern hemisphere, previous observation of the moon's surface detected some form of hydrogen, but were unable to distinguish between water and its close chemical relative, hydroxyl. Data from this location reveal water in concentrations of 100 to 412 parts per million, roughly equivalent to a 12-ounce bottle of water, trapped in a cubic meter of soil across the lunar surface. This is pretty interesting too, because we don't even know if there actually was water before, and this discovery of water makes it clear that on some other planets, water does exist outside the Earth, at least in space, and on other planets. So this is a really interesting discovery. By the middle of November, the 2020 presidential election had been pulled a few days as they were counting all the votes. But some swing states have had some early votes, which were also counted as well. And in some states where Trump version won, Biden won those states. This made Biden win in the Electoral College, which was the first time since 1992 that an incumbent president had lost to another candidate. In fact, a month later, they recounted the votes from the Electoral College, and another counting by Congress is underway. And still it's confirmed that Biden will be our next president. Later in November and in December, Pfizer completes its trials of the COVID-19 vaccine, which took months to develop and test. And the vaccine happens to be 95% effective. So currently in December, all they're doing is they're vaccinating healthcare workers and the people that are apparently the most important in taking care of people first. And for most other people, when it comes to problems with the vaccine, it's going to take until early 2021, a few months. And this is just a few months too many in my opinion, because I think we've already waited long enough. But the people who are running the vaccine and everything, they say otherwise. Now that we have wrapped up our retrospective of 2020, it's time we go over some few honorable mentions. Or dishonorable mentions, if you will. Alright, on January 29th, President Donald Trump signs the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement replacing NAFTA. On Leap Day, February 29th, the peace agreement is signed between the U.S. and the Taliban in Qatar, leading the U.S. to withdraw the troops from Afghanistan. On March 5th, the ICC authorizes the Afghanistan War Crimes Inquiry to proceed, allowing U.S. citizens to be investigated for the first time. Now, ICC stands for International Criminal Court. On March 17th, the Euro 2020 and the Copa America, which the America Cup football tournaments, are postponed until the summer of 2021. On April 15th, the Tour de France is delayed until August of 2020. On May 3rd and 4th, Venezuelan descendants and a private military company based in America, Civil Corp USA, have unsuccessfully attempted to infiltrate Venezuela and remove President Nicolas Maduro from office. On August 11th, Russia approves the first COVID vaccine. August 25th, the continent of Africa is declared free of wild polio, the second virus since smallpox 40 years before. On September 16th, the United Nations Human Rights Council fact-finding mission formally accuses the Venezuelan government of crimes against humanity, from killings, torture, violence against political opposition, and disappearance cases since 2014. President Nicolas Maduro and other senior Venezuelan officials are among those charged. And finally, on October 1st, the European Union launches legal action against the UK, accusing the UK of breaking international law by overriding a section of the Brexit withdrawal agreement. And not to mention, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Olympics was also postponed for the first time ever. Not canceled completely, but they're going to have it in 2021 next year. In my opinion, I'm not going to watch it, but if you're going to watch it in 2021, hey, more power to you. But a real dishonorable mention is the ever-growing amount of COVID cases. We're going to have probably 100 million by the end of this year, if not more, worldwide. And only a few countries have no COVID cases so far. There are a lot of dishonorable mentions I can mention, but that's where I would just stop right here. And now we go over many notable deaths and people have died, though I can only just name a few here. Of course, the basketball player Kobe Bryant. The mathematician from NASA who helped launch people in space, Katherine Johnson. The animator Gene Deitch. Singer Little Richard. Wilford Brimley.
Well, if you have diabetes and you're on Medicare, your testing supplies may be covered.
Game show host Alex Trebek.
And now, here is the host of Jeopardy, Alex Trebek.
Thank you, Johnny Gilbert, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome, everyone. Welcome, 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 as Jeopardy begins its 37th season of original quiz programming.
And, of course, the actor Chadwick Boseman, who is known for his role in Black Panther. So yeah, that was it. 2020 was mostly a horrible year. I mean, personally, it could be the worst year so far, but we don't know yet. So, my final rating in this review, or retrospective of 2020, I give this year, since the pandemic happened in most countries, a 1 out of 10. However, before the pandemic, for the most part, when we were still good, it's a 4 out of 10. And how they've dealt with the pandemic, having to cancel school back and forth and everything else, I just don't think it was the way to go, in my opinion. I hope you enjoyed this retrospective of 2020 as my first retrospective on this channel. And that should be about all. This has been Brick Johnson from the Nostalgia Network, and I'm out.